Monday Night Football is the Dallas Cowboys versus the Houston Texans. Plus, we have your Week 11 recap. Hi, welcome to the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast for Monday, November 18th, 2024. I am Aaron Schatz. You know me as the DVOA guy from FTN Fantasy. He is Mike Tanier. You know him from his Substack, The Two Deep Zone, miketanier.substack.com. Before we get into talking about this week's games, let's remind you that our sponsor is Underdog Fantasy, and the NFL season is fully underway, and the best place to experience it is Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing app in the industry, and they offer a new customer special for FTN users, up to $1,000 on your first-time deposit. Head to Underdog for a deposit match up to $1,000 when you sign up with code FTN. That is up to $1,000 extra. NFL season is here, and who better to celebrate with than Underdog Fantasy? You know, you mentioned in your column this morning that Bills Chiefs was exciting, like going to your first concert. Let's date ourselves. What was your first concert?
Credit card fraud. No, I'm not saying. I'm going to make something up. So it wasn't my first concert. But I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan.
That's a good one.
Alive, with Greg Allman opening for him at the Mann Music Center in Philadelphia. My brother and one of his friends, absolutely phenomenal. That was my third or fourth concert. Not revealing my first. What about you?
Elvis Costello.
Elvis Costello with the attractions?
No, on the Spike tour.
Okay.
That was my first.
Veronica and those guys.
Yeah, I don't remember who was in the band. And then REM on the Green Tour was my second concert.
That's a high level of cool. All of my stuff is much more classic Rocky. It goes way back, you know. And of course, many Springsteen shows.
Let's talk about 3 of the top 5 teams in DVOA from last week lost. Now, I ran something in the DVOA commentary last week comparing coaches over their history, comparing their actual wins to the total of their post-game win expectancy. And the coach who I found among the active coaches had the strongest negative record of underperforming was Kyle Shanahan.
Oh, shocking. Oh,
and the coaches that had the strongest record of overperforming included Mike Tomlin.
Again, shocking development.
Look at what happened this weekend. And I was talking this morning actually to Robbie Green, and he did some analysis using something different. He used some analysis comparing in-game win probability to actual wins.
Okay.
And he found that most of the top people we consider the top coaches win more games than in-game win probability would suggest.
Wow. Which means,
and on the other side is Kyle Shanahan. So what we have here is 2 completely different methods that suggest that coaching is real.
Yes.
And that Kyle Shanahan is bad at it. Like, obviously not scheming and not necessarily preparation between the weeks, but in-game decision. The fact is, Kyle Shanahan has a habit of losing games that his team should otherwise win or at least be 50-50 on. And by the way, John Harbaugh does not have a good record with this either, although it is not as consistently negative as Shanahan's. And meanwhile, Mike Tomlin has this record of winning those games. And I'll tell you, the 49ers had a 43% post-game win expectancy.
Okay.
And the Ravens had a 47%. So the quote-unquote right team won in each game, but they were basically 50-50. And Tomlin has a history of pulling these 50-50 games out, and Shanahan has a history of losing these things.
Like there's something intangible, something that can't really be measured in these probabilities, and maybe something that might be almost like counterfactual or counter probabilistic that these coaches are doing.
Yeah, like all the advanced metrics last week had the Ravens and the 49ers very high.
Right.
So this is not an issue with DVOA specifically. Why does DVOA seem to overestimate? This is the second straight year we've done this with the Ravens.
Okay.
This is the second straight year where the Ravens have a DVOA that's much better than their record. But all the advanced metrics are like this. They all really like the Ravens. They all really like the 49ers. So we are clearly, there's something in the coaching that is getting missed. And in particular, I think with the 49ers, and then on the opposite with the Steelers,
right.
Some people have been talking about Mike Tomlin as a coach of the year candidate, and I think he absolutely is.
Right.
Though when it comes to things that we can actually measure analytically, he's frustrating.
Right.
What he's done with that team is remarkable. Russell Wilson had the worst performance of any quarterback this week by our stats.
That's surprising because there was some.
They won the game.
Yes, they won the game. 6 field goal win. Their second 6 field goal no touchdown win of the year. They have 2 of these. Okay, which a 6 field goal game should be. You would think like a loss, unless you're playing somebody terrible or it was icy or something like that. And on the Ravens side of things, not to harp on my thing, the net penalty differential is now minus 228. Okay,
they can't stop committing penalties.
Right, a dozen penalties in that game, 3 turnovers, of course, which is probably the bigger story, 2 missed field goals, and the dozen penalties. And it's like, I feel like they're not going to be a high turnover team. Tucker will probably snap out of this slump to some degree. They can't stop committing these penalties, and it's formation penalties, and it's ineligible man downfield penalties, and it's defensive penalties, and it renders the things they do right gibberish. Like when you have like a 25-yard screen to Derrick Henry and it comes back, and the next play is the bomb that turns into the interception. That's just like you are just crippling yourself with these penalties.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what to do about Justin Tucker. That's the problem with kicker. You can't just bench your kicker for a couple weeks and use another kicker unless you invent a made-up injury to put him on IR for 4 weeks and then bring him back.
And what are you? Who are you going to replace Justin Tucker with?
Some schmuck.
With some schmuck who's not going to be as good, where you're better off letting Tucker go out there and practice on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Someone said I think it was Blake Allen Murphy from Arizona said, you replace him with whoever Arizona gets rid of once both their kickers are healthy, which means either Matt Prater or Chat Ryland.
Oh, God. And Prater is just another old kicker who could just.
Yeah, and Ryland is not really that good. Like, he's a young guy who's not really that good. Like, so they just have to kind of wait it out with Tucker, but it's awful. Like, he's just completely, I said yesterday, this is his Peyton Manning in 2015 season.
Right. He's the Aaron Rodgers of kickers right now. And I don't know if this is just a big slump that he'll snap out of and have a normal late career, or if he really is Peyton Manning in 2015. He's having that season. By the way, in terms of kickers, Evan McPherson, who was very good during the Bengals Super Bowl run, is a mess, and he's cost the Bengals a playoff opportunity at this point. Eagles are having trouble with Jake Elliott right now. He almost cost them the Thursday night game. It's a weird time for kickers in general.
Hitchhiker's Pie says kickers sometimes have a bad year and then improve. I don't think there's any way to tell if this is an aging cliff or just Tucker falling prey to normal kicker volatility. I think that's correct. It's just that he had never fallen prey to it before, but we don't know the answer to what this is.
Right. So as the Ravens, you can't just say, well, we're going to get off the waiver wire and put him out there for a couple of weeks. You got to fix the other stuff. And it starts with formation penalties.
Yes. And also, the 49ers had a lot of penalties yesterday. It's not as much of a season-long thing for them, but it was in this game. Flynn Haggerty says, what are the odds that the 49ers figure some things out and make a 21 style run? I would say probably 10%. Now, I didn't watch the game yesterday, but all the reports that I was seeing on the social medias was saying McCaffrey does not look like he's all the way back. And they're only going to make that run if McCaffrey is fully healthy. And I'll tell you what the playoff odds say now.
Yeah.
The 49ers are at 26% to make the playoffs.
26%.
And 14% to win the division.
Right.
Their schedule is hard. Their next 2 games are at the Packers and the Bills, and they still have the Lions on the schedule.
Yes. They have a very difficult upcoming schedule. The Cardinals, who are a game ahead, have a pretty reasonable schedule. They have a kind of a Seahawks, Vikings, Seahawks trio, but the Seahawks are not particularly strong despite the win on Sunday. And the Cardinals still have the Patriots coming up. The Cardinals still have the Panthers coming up. So there are wins there that can help them just kind of pull past the 49ers. I think people are right about McCaffrey. He kind of just looked like a guy. I couldn't tell the difference between him and Jordan Mason. Debo looks like just a guy right now. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's the question: is where's that coming from?
Right. Is he banged up? Is he on Planet Debo? Is it both? Has he reached an age curve because he's been around and he's been nicked up for a while? So I look at them, and their thing is, you're right, it was penalties. This is a team, they were getting to about the 30-yard line and then stopping. And this is usually they get to the 20-yard line and stop. This time it was a sack, it was a penalty, it was a couple of bad plays in a row, and they just kept the Seahawks in this game over and over and over again.
I realize we're bouncing between the games, but I want to give my props to the Steelers defense for a really great game. They were bringing pressure on Jackson with 4 guys. And then when he would look downfield, nobody would be open.
Yes.
They were getting both pass coverage and pass rush on like every play. Yes. And then when they didn't, Zay Flowers let it bounce off his chest. So like it was a really good defensive performance. And Lamar Jackson played well enough for the Ravens to win that game. If Tucker hits one of those 2 field goals, or if Chris Boswell misses 1 out of 6,
right,
the Ravens win the game. But the Ravens offense has been so good this year that taking the Ravens offense from historically good to, well, if the kicker doesn't suck, I guess they're good enough. That is quite an accomplishment.
Quite an accomplishment. Herbig comes off the bench and has a couple big plays, including the 2-point conversion. He blows it up at the end. And you're right. And what if the Ravens don't, with 40 seconds left before halftime, try to run some plays and Isaiah likely fumbles deep in his own territory? There's 3 Steelers points right there. Justin Hill doesn't let that catch get ripped out of his hand by Wilson.
Yeah, that was technically an interception by Peyton Wilson, I believe is the name of the rookie linebacker, but it really was a fumble. It's technically it's an interception because it never hit the ground, but the ball was stolen. It's not anything Lamar Jackson did.
Right. It was like a fumble-ception or a strip-a-section. But those are strong plays. But yeah, pass rush consistently throughout the game. Did well enough against Henry, so he didn't really become a super factor. There was a play where he gets tripped up. Derrick Henry gets tripped up where it looks like a touchdown. I think it was Minka swiped his legs out from under him. Now, I think the Ravens scored on that drive anyway, but it was still a demonstration. Here's all the things the Ravens do to pull away from you, and the Steelers aren't allowing it.
The game we haven't talked about yet is Bills-Chiefs. I don't feel like I learned anything from that game.
Good.
I feel like my opinion about both of those teams and their strengths and weaknesses is exactly the same as it was before the game, right? The Chiefs are, Kelsey's not quite as good as he's been in year past, and Xavier Worthy will make some mistakes. And I was surprised they didn't throw to Hopkins more, but, their defense is very good, and the Bill, Josh Allen is special, and Shakir is better than people think. All my opinions about those 2 teams are about the same as what they were before.
Shakir played well. Amari Cooper made a pretty big impact in that.
He made a couple of really amazing catches. I will say that game was a really good why we traded for Amari Cooper game.
Right. Yeah, you can see the difference maker he can be. But you're right. It's they're good. They're good. Bills were a little bit better this time. We'll see what happens next time. It was hard to come up with anything that was super noteworthy and interesting.
The Chiefs now get the number 1 seed, 53% of the simulations.
Ooh, that's down.
The Bills at 34 and the Steelers at 7. The Steelers' schedule still gets harder than in the second half of the year. But what's interesting about this win is that it makes it much less likely that the Chiefs can sit people in the last couple of weeks because they're now only 1 game ahead of the Bills and they don't have the tiebreaker. So if the Bills keep winning, the Chiefs can't sit people.
And they're only 2 games ahead of the Chargers. So it's not so there's a chance that they could be still battling to sew up the division at the end of that season. And that's significant, again, because then you don't get those rest days.
Here's a completely different question. Camden Cap says, is tempo going to start being more of an advantage compared to motion because easy zone and man indicators are going away?
Okay. First, the YouTube people talk too much about motion.
Nate Tice ran some numbers suggesting that the advantage of motion has gone away in the last couple of years.
They talk about motion the way Emerald used to talk about like Cajun Spice. Bam, 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 bam. Put it on everything. I don't know if the advantage is going away or if like the folks on YouTube are starting to notice more. But like they're kind of two sides of the same coin, because with tempo you're usually not using a lot of motion. You want to get up, you want a static formation, you want to go. Okay, so they're flip sides to each other, and I think it's always going to be a push-pull between the two of them.
If you think about it, the Colts offense with Peyton Manning was all about the tempo and no motion, and it was very static.
It was very static, right? Late career Patriots. I mean, a lot of times it was Brady just taking over in these games. So if you've got a veteran quarterback who is comfortable with motion and that's going to let them play, that's the way you should approach it. If you're somebody who wants to dictate and try to get advantages and see obvious man keys and things like that, then you want to use more motion.
Talk a little bit about the Detroit Lions here. The Detroit Lions are now, after that win, the number 3 DVOA team ever through 10 games.
Okay.
It was a huge win.
It was a huge. So someone asked, and this is probably a yes on the Discord, are they the best Lions team since World War II?
I mean, I don't know much about the Lions in the 50s, but I'm going with yes.
I'll go with yeah. I don't know. But Bobby Lane was like had the right amount of booze in him. Like on some of those games, maybe they were a little better. But yeah, this has got to be. So 5th all time.
Third.
Okay.
Third behind the 2007 Patriots and 1991 Redskins through 10 games. Yep.
Round up the usual suspects.
The 85 Bears are on that list, and a couple of Cowboys teams, and the 98 Broncos, and the 1984 Dolphins, and the 2018 Chiefs.
Okay. Yes.
And last year's Ravens, who DVOA absolutely loved.
There's always one.
Most yardage differential, 475 yards, since a 1979 Rams-Seahawks game where the Seahawks had -7 yards.
I think I remember something about this game. Like it's stuck in my memory. Yeah. Jim Zorn and the Seahawks. Oh my God.
45 years there has not been a game. The shock to me was that this is not one of the greatest games ever in terms of DVOA, even if you take out the opponent adjustments.
Okay.
Like it was 113% without opponent adjustments, and the best games are like 140 or 150. So it was not quite as good as the best games ever, but it was, I mean, incredible, like just total freaking domination. Doug Peterson, I can't believe he hasn't lost his job yet, unless it's happened in the last 18 minutes.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did I miss it this morning? Like I've been waiting, and there's like news coming out of Jacksonville. So like, the office is open and whatnot.
I mean, there's news coming out of New York that they're going back to Tommy DeVito as starting quarterback. Where's the Doug Peterson news?
Right. I need a double dose of really sad, pathetic news to go with the Tommy DeVito and the Peterson. But Peterson has to be gone after that. That's a team that I know they've had injuries, et cetera. That
defense is basically the same people as last year. It should not be this bad.
It is, and they were getting increasingly demoralized as the game went on. You could see their tackling and things like that started to fade.
Ferdy Brackman says it feels like Amon-Ra St. Brown ranked up more yards than the Saints and the Browns combined.
Are you not counting Taysom? Did you see Taysom?
Yeah, I said was the Taysom Hill game yesterday, wasn't it?
Taysom had, I think, 193 total.
Yeah, 75-yard touchdown run, I think.
He had a 75-yard touchdown run. He had a 33-yard touchdown run. They had him in the slot. He caught, I think, 8 passes. He threw 2 passes. One was an interception. It was goofy. The other one was like a little trick play. It was the Taysom Hill experience. But, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, personally outperformed the Browns in their entirety.
Flynn Haggerty points out that the Lions won the 1957 NFL title over the Browns 59-14. So that may be your best Lions team ever.
Right, and that might have been the late Otto Graham era, so they were playing against a generational team. There's something. Brian, are you watching? We need the best Lions.
We need our 50s stuff.
We need our 1950s. Yes, Brian Knowles. We need yes. That was an 8-4 team, though, so I don't know.
No, I think, that might have been a big championship win, but this one, this team is better as far as regular season goes.
Okay, Bobby Lane was hurt for part of that season or in the drunk tank. Yale Larry, John Henry Johnson, Jack Christensen. That's a pretty damn good team. But I don't know. These guys.
That was after Otto Graham, says Hitchhiker's Pie. Otto Graham retired in 55.
Okay, so they're beating Blanton Collier's and who was the quarterback? Ryan. Oh well, whatever.
Yeah, your knowledge of the 50s Browns is better than my knowledge.
No one cares. No one cares.
Okay, back to the modern world. Instead of counting up the top 12, I'm going to do the weighted DVOA top 12. We're going to switch this week to weighted DVOA. So we are giving a little bit less weight to the first couple weeks of the season. The surprise is the team that's not in the top 12, which is Pittsburgh.
Oh, wow.
But we talked about that, which is they keep dramatically outperforming DVOA, and that's Pittsburgh, man. That's what's going on. Number 12 in weighted DVOA is Green Bay.
They needed a little help yesterday. They needed to help themselves at the end.
Number 11, Washington, and number 10, Arizona. Those three teams are all basically tied.
Yeah, I'm running a thing on the Arizona Cardinals for later in the week because everyone sleeps on them.
They're for real. Their defense is now above average on the season. Their defense,
right, and their offense is a lot of fun. And who's even on this defense besides Budda Baker? Who are they? Who are these guys? Zaven Collins.
Nobody knows.
Zaven
Collins. Yeah. Number 9, the Denver Broncos. I think we have to hop off our priors on Bo Nix a little bit.
Who's winning?
Like, I know the Falcons don't have a good pass rush, but Doug Farrar put some film up of him making just really good, like, tight window throws. Like, I mean, I don't have to say that he's great, but I think he may be at least average.
He's coming around week by week, and I don't have the numbers yet. He might have the most downfield attempts, deep attempts now in the NFL.
He
might be throwing more deep passes than anybody because he was like in the top 3 or 4 entering this week, and my eyes bugged out. So Beauregard sideways is dead. Everyone, Bo Nix is for real.
Number 8, the Los Angeles Superchargers.
Big win yesterday. Weird.
Number 7, a team that's lower in weighted DVOA than in full season, the Minnesota Vikings.
Lower in weighted than because they have the early season win.
Because they were better early on than they are now.
They're walking a tightrope right now. That win against the Titans was not as easy as it should have been.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what happens when you depend on defense, though. When you depend on defense, you walk a tightrope because of defense being less predictive than offense.
Right. That's it. And you got Sam Darnold playing down to game managerial mode, and this is what you get. Tight wins over teams like the Jaguars, tighter than it needs to be against the Titans.
5 and 6, basically tied. San Francisco and Kansas City.
Okay, San Francisco's still hanging in there.
Still hanging in. DVOA still loves them, but not the last couple weeks it doesn't.
Right. It's so tricky because what seems to be going wrong is so like hard to spot.
Yeah.
And yet it keeps happening. The same thing keeps happening.
Number 4, the opposite of Minnesota, a team that is better in recent weeks than they were early on, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Eagles fly. Can't argue with that. Pretty strong performance overall on Thursday night.
Number 3, Buffalo.
Yes.
Number 2, Baltimore.
I would say they feel like they should be flipped, but we remember what happened when they faced each other. So there's still a lot.
There's still a little bit of that. And then number 1, way ahead, just way ahead, is the Detroit Lions.
Who is stopping them?
The answer to that I mean no disrespect to the Eagles.
Right.
But it feels like the answer to who is stopping Detroit is the AFC Championship.
Wow.
Is the AFC Championship. It feels like their route to the Super Bowl is so much clearer than Buffalo, Baltimore, Kansas City, who have to play each other.
Right.
I mean, they could definitely lose to Philly. I mean, there's other teams they could lose to, but it most likely would be Philly because I think Philly is most likely to be the 2 seed. But Detroit just seems like everything works right now.
And when you match them up, you could see the Eagles having a peak game and being able to do it. And then you say, well, which team is more likely to start making little mistakes? And the Lions make very few little mistakes. They make so few little mistakes. They're very tough.
All right, Monday Night Football, the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys. I looked up some stats on this that are interesting. The Cowboys defense is 5th against deep passes and dead last against short passes.
Okay. Completion prop, perhaps.
And if you are interested in a prop for early in the game and you believe in this kind of split, which again, I found is not very predictive, but if you believe in it, excuse me, the Texans are 14th on offense and first on defense in the first half.
Okay.
And 25th on offense and 10th on defense in the second half.
Okay.
So if you feel like going to bed early, the line for the half is Texans -4.
Oh, I'll take that. I will definitely take that. I might look into the over-under for first half as well. I don't see the Cowboys putting up any more fights this year, honestly.
I mean, this is the Cowboys team has given up and they're bad in every way versus a Texans team where the offense has been surprisingly bad, but Nico Collins is coming back and the defense has been really, really good.
Defense is really good, and they really have to watch their six because the Colts are not going away, obviously. So they can't sit there and say, well, we can just coast and be like the Falcons and just coast to a stop and still think we're going to win our division.
Are we both on Texans -7 even on the road?
Yeah, I'm going to take it. Again, I'm probably going to play the first half, but I would take -7.
Yeah, I would too. Go Texans in that hardcore interstate rivalry
that only Jerry Jones actually cares about.
It's funny. No, it's funny. In 2002, when they realigned the league, do you know that they set up the schedule of which divisions played each other specifically so that Dallas would play Houston in Houston's first year?
But that's more so when they can fill the stadium in Houston with Cowboys.
Right.
I'm assuming that's what they
because there's a rivalry.
Because there's a rivalry. It was to try and seed some people to show up for that game. There was an episode of King of the Hill about this, I swear, where the Cowboys were doing bad and Hank and the guys go and they see a Texans game. Look it up. I know it happened. So
all right.
That was the highlight of the rivalry between these teams involves Boomhauer in some way. So that's all I've got to say.
That does it for today's show. Thank you to everybody who is watching and listening live. Remember, we're here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Mondays and Thursdays. Thank you to everyone listening afterwards on the podcast. Don't forget to read Mike's Substack, miketanier.substack.com. And we will see you Thursday morning at 11 a.m. to preview Week 12 in the NFL. So long, everybody.